So as you get leaner and more depleted over time, that time will increase to the point where you're eating a lot more calories and a lot more carbohydrate. There's actually, and you know, we don't have the time, there are things that are coming up that I'm looking into that I've heard from. I have a client, doctor, chiropractor, who comes in town regularly and trains with me, and we were talking one night about it, and I said, you know, Rich, it's kind of like the body, we assume that every calorie we take in is used, and it's a consumed calorie that counts. But I told him, I said, there's almost like there's a point where you're taking in so many carbs and so many calories that it's almost not fully digested, that you're not using all of those calories. And he rattled off a word or a term, and I'm like, he said, that's what it is. I'm like, what? He said there's a term for it, and he rattled off the term, and the wife can't remember the term. I keep saying, I'm going to go back and ask him. What we're looking at now, when I say we, me, is, and I don't want to get into the specifics of it too much because it's very early, but we're going to do some analysis to find out whether, matter of factly, from a scientific standpoint, whether there is actually nutrients that are passing through that really just aren't digested. Because what you run into is when someone is really lean and I say before a show, and I understand that everybody has a diet for a show. The reason I use that as an example is because it's so extreme. If you can diet for a show and something works for that type of extreme conditioning, it pretty much will work for everybody, because anything else is backing off from that extreme. Okay, so the only thing it really changes for us are people who really don't weight train. It can still work, but it has to be changed a little bit, because when you don't weight train, you're not depleting your body of glycogen and the carbohydrates. So your body it doesn't want to suck those carbohydrates. Here's an example. Adult onset diabetes is from eating primarily processed carbohydrates that your body doesn't need. Then you have high circulating blood sugar levels. You have nowhere to store the carbohydrate because you don't have depleted muscles from working out and training them. So then you end up with high body fat, obesity. You end up with essentially being diabetic. That's the type of diet. So that's why I get a lot of people who say, oh, that's unhealthy. It's only unhealthy if you're not depleted and you're an average person. If you're an average person and you eat like that, never mind that you're only eating like that once a day for a certain amount of time, or I'm sorry, not once a day, but once a week, where people who are obese and diabetic do that every day for every meal, pretty much, and they have caused that damage over years and years. But the point is they're not training. They're not an athlete who has caused this situation in their body where they're able to suck those calories up and actually benefit from those calories. That's why carbohydrate gets such a bad rap, really, because carbohydrate itself really isn't bad. It's a timing issue. Even with the clients during the week, and myself included, when you get done training, even though you're eating clean during the week and it's not a skip load, you're still taking in, for that one meal, you're taking in 30, 40, 50 grams of carbs to replenish after you train, and it's a simple carb. It could be kids cereal. Kids cereal is a favorite of mine because it's so easy, practical, and it's so convenient, and it solves the problem of getting those simple processed carbs in there after you work out, and then it's back to the diet again. So there's, like I said, it's important to me to bring up the critical comments about it being unhealthy so that I can explain why it's not in a situation of a depleted athlete. It's important to me because that's like the number one thing that gets thrown. You know who gets thrown at me at? It's never anybody who's concerned about health. It's always another nutritionist. Their idea is so much better. I mean, it's just a constant competition.
Does it have to be like processed, or can it be like fruits? That's it.
Right. It can be fruits. It can be it can be sweet potatoes. It can be rice and that sort of thing. The thing is with that is it doesn't work as well. What I try to say is combine them so that you get a combination. what some people will do is they'll think, oh, well, I could go just eat like low-fat donuts and stuff. And it's like, no, look, you got to balance it between, yes, they're processed, but you want to still get nutrition out of you. Like as an example, make a, cold cereal is a good example, but make, like make spaghetti, with, a meat sauce or a marinara sauce that's relatively low-fat, or make a homemade low-fat pizza with healthier toppings. It doesn't have to be all, like I don't like it when people say, well, I was drinking full-flavor soda. Well, then we want to keep it food so that your brain and your stomach are still connected in saying whether you're hungry or not. If you drink your calories, you can drink a lot of sugar calories before, even if you're full, before your body says, okay, now I've had enough. You need to go on by hunger, because, and hunger is dismissed a lot in times of dieting, because you're supposed to ignore it and just deal with it, and hunger doesn't have anything. Hunger has everything to do with it. Hunger tells you whether you're deficient or you're, like when you crave something, you're always going to crave what you're not eating. If you take your carbohydrate source and you make it all fruit, all of a sudden you're going to have this weird craving for noodles. I mean, it's a bizarre thing. When you eliminate something like it, you'll crave it. Take a high carbohydrate, low fat diet, you're going to crave peanut butter or avocado, and it's going to drive you nuts. It's just how the body works. So ideally, throughout the week, you shouldn't be ravenously hungry anyway. You should know you're dieting, but you shouldn't be like, I just want to eat my arm off. If no one was here and I had a third arm, I would just do it. You should have the energy to get through. Yes, you're working hard. Yes, you're losing body fat. You're not going to feel like you just ate cake, but then by the time you get to your Sunday, you feel you're depleted, that hunger is there, and you eat base. And this is what I tell people, they freak, because everybody wants black and white. They want to know how much, just tell me how much and I'll do it, Skip. Well, it's not that simple. Your hunger will dictate how much carbohydrate you eat. When you're no longer hungry, then you stop. When you get hungry again, then you eat it again. You eat carbs again during that time. Hunger dictates how depleted. The more depleted you are, and the leaner you get, the more hungry you're going to be. They say we weren't meant to have to look like we have such low body fat levels. It really kind of goes against the body's ability. It's almost like a survival mechanism, and that's why you don't force yourself lean. You need to coerce it and manipulate your body into getting lean like that. Because you try to force your body to do anything, your body ain't gonna do it.
I'm still trying to understand I guess the carb, because I carb cycle, so I'll have high carbs on my heavy days.
Okay, you said your carb
cycle. I do carb cycle.
Oh, okay, carb. What's the second? I'm sorry.
Cycling.
Carb cycle.
Cycling. I'm sorry. For some reason, I couldn't get that.
Right. I'll speak to it. So what I'm trying to understand with the skip loading, is it that it's on the assumption on the days that you're not working out, you have been eating these refined carbs or high carbs?
Well,
what I tend to do with carb cycling is the days that I'm not working out, I will eat no carbs or low carbs.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there's some. Okay, well,
so
technically it is carb cycling if you think, because you are, relatively low and then you bump up for that one day. I don't like to call it carb cycling because I think that the traditional way to carb cycle is incredibly complicated, or I don't want to say incredibly complicated, that's not fair. It's more complicated than it needs to be. And not everybody does it the same way, but you get into low, medium, and high days, and it's like, what day is it? What do I have to eat today? It's easy to cross numbers and that sort of thing. There will be a different carbohydrate. There usually is a different carbohydrate intake on a non-training day, on a non-weight training day, simply because, again, it comes back to the premise of you don't want to take in, or you don't need to take in any more carbohydrate than you really need to train and feel relatively full. So on the days that you would weight train, you would tend to take in a little bit more carbohydrate than you would on a non-training day. Sometimes it can be completely no carbs. It just depends on that individual and how you function. The reason I kept asking you what you said, one was because I didn't hear you, but I thought you were saying carb sensitive. And I was ready to pounce on that one. Because carb sensitive, when people say they're carb sensitive, it's usually a very overused, it's almost like, well, I have higher levels of body fat, and so when I eat carbs, it just makes me fat. Well, no, not necessarily. More people think they're carb sensitive, a lot more think they're carb sensitive than they truly are. It's usually, I just have to say, no, you're calorie sensitive. If you eat too many calories, your ass will get fat, just like me. But I do know too, there are exceptions. I mean, the older I get, I can't function very well with starchy carbs. I just don't do well. I suppose I could keep starchy carbs in there and cut my protein intake, but I don't want to do that. And I certainly don't want to, because I figured out individually for myself, I don't do well on low amounts of fat either. Fat helps to satiate. It makes me feel that I'm not as hungry, much more so than a carbohydrate. And it does that for most people too. So there are exceptions, but.
What happens if you want to maintain that low body percentage, but you want to stay lean and grow?
See, I like that because that's usually how I am. Yeah. It's the same thing. What you do, yeah. What you do is, and I didn't touch on the term, but the morning of or the weekend of, what you do is you track your weight during the week. Let's say you start off the week at 200 pounds, you go through the week, and when you get to the weekend, the morning of your skip load, you're at 198. You go, okay, cool, you know, I lost 2 pounds this week, sweet, you know, and let's say you're working with me and I set it up and I said, you know, hey, you know, we're gonna do a 5-hour skip load today. You do your 5 hours and you go back to your regular diet for the rest of the day. And then as we get into this next week, what we're watching for is we're watching for a baseline weight. And I say baseline because I'll always say, my clients know what's your baseline. What they'll be like, oh, I hit baseline today. Baseline just means when you get back to that weight of 198, because what happens when you take in carbs, you always gain weight. Okay, you don't gain body fat, you gain water weight because carbohydrate combines with water when it's stored away as glycogen. But you also sometimes you even puff up a little bit because you'll hold a little bit of water. Your body's not used to taking in that higher amount of carbohydrate. But after 2 to 3 days, that water shifts, you drop it, and then you get back to, let's say you go up to, you know, 205 from 198. I mean, that's a 204, 205. And then, you know, women freak, like, oh my God, you're stupid, you don't know what you're doing. Well, they don't usually say that, but my wife does. And, you know, the guys, they don't care because they're a little bigger, so they feel, wow. You tend to be stronger, too, for the couple days after you load. A lot of times it's the water, it's the leverage. You get a little bit better pump, and it's a good deal. So, coming back to when we were talking about earlier about the priority of the training, when you are skip loading, you want those weak muscle groups to be trained earlier in the week because you're going to have more energy. And then you put those stronger ones at the end. I think it was you who had those stronger muscle groups at the end of the week where you are going to be a little bit more run down later in the week as your weight starts to fall off and you're running on lower carbohydrate or lower calories. So as you get into the week, that water starts to fall off, and it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday type thing where you're going to baseline. 90% of people are going to baseline in that area. Okay. Once you hit the baseline, it's important because what that baseline says is when you hit it and then how much you are able to drop below that before the next load comes around on the weekend is how you're able to gauge whether the length of the skip load is long enough. Here's an example. Let's say you just baseline, you get back to your regular weight Tuesday morning, and then you drop 3 more pounds before Friday. Clearly to me, because I've done it for a long time, your skip load can be, it's too small, it can go higher. And again, when I was saying earlier, this all comes back to taking as many calories as you can. You want that load to be as big as possible. You just can't jump that load to be huge to begin with because you have to build into it incrementally. Now, you may want to build into it fast. If you keep baselining early in the week like that, you're going to build into it quicker. Some people won't baseline until Friday, Saturday, even the morning of, they'll drop a pound below baseline on Sunday morning. And they're like, well, everybody else baselines on Wednesday, this is messed up. Look, as long as you're dropping below baseline, you're getting lean. Now, if you're forcing your water out or you're doing something else, that's different. But all things being equal, if you're just losing and you're dropping by Saturday and Sunday, oh well, I would say you're okay, you're in the minority, but oh well, you're getting leaner, and that's all that really matters. So that's how, again, you'll try to gauge how long that load needs to be based on when you baseline. Did that? Yeah, okay. Okay, I want to make sure, because what'll happen is I'm going to answer it, and I'll get off on this tangent over here, and I never get back to this tangent.
I understand what you're saying, because like, just to maintain that same low for the year, which is kind of like funny, because like right now I'm injured and then
Yeah.
I'm eating the same way, and I'm just watching every line goes away,
Right.
everything goes away. But
Well, if
so
you're
it's
not
just
able to
not-
train, that's
not different.
Okay, yeah.
Can't even touch a line.
Exactly,
And
that's
it's
a
not-
bigger difference.
No, it's not, not eating.
Right.
You can't do any training as far
Right.
as just doing cardio or whatever.
Yeah, if you're training and you just want to maintain the same look, and you're at a leanness level that you want to be, then really, you should have a load on the weekend that is big enough to where you still, provided your diet is tight and it's consistent throughout the week. Yeah, you just always baseline in that middle of the week. And if you don't, you start to baseline later in the week after a couple, then you know, okay, maybe I'm not, maybe the load is a little big, and then you would trim it back. Look, anything, no matter what you do, the training, the diet, supplementation, everything really is a constant, it's constantly being fine-tuned. Because even if it works for 3 or 4 weeks, it may not, there's no saying that it's going to continue to work. So you have to constantly evaluate, hey, and sometimes the most subtle change can keep things going.
So you say that the same thing for like supplements, like for seeing protein shake, the seeing the same thing, because
Yeah.
every time I go to buy like a supplement, there's always something new with the same brand that I'm always used to. I'm like, what the hell? And like, I find that manufacturers don't maintain the same. They always add something, change
Oh.
the label and add this and try this instead and do this. So you find
I need a new manufacturer.
no, I'm serious. No, I'm serious.
I see what you're
The only
saying.
one I see that maintain the same thing is actually Twin Labs products.
Okay.
They're always the same.
Because usually what happens is the person buying it wants something different. Because they want to try everything. And I don't know that that's your case. I see what you're saying. You do want everything to be as consistent as possible.
Right.
Because again,
What works now, like, because what works for me now, there's like 2 different new brands. And I'm like,
right.
whoa.
But not necessarily from a supplement. Look, I'm not huge on supplements. I hadn't touched on them yet, but I can cover that in 2 minutes. Supplements, in my opinion, are just that. They're never going to be a deal maker, and they're never going to be a deal breaker. Doesn't matter if you're doing a show or if you're trying to gain muscle, whatever. The only thing that truly works are drugs. And I'm not saying that like everybody should use drugs. What I'm saying is, don't kid yourself, because anything you buy over the counter works this much. And then the argument is, well, if it only works this much, if I take it for a year, well, if you take something and you spend money on something and you use it for a year and you can't see a legitimate, like you can't quantify a legitimate difference, then why take it? You know what I mean? It's the same with creatine. Creatine, I laugh. I mean, I had a creatine in one of the things that I had my clients use, and I used for a long time. And then they just discontinued it. And this is through my nutrition company with my name on it, and I'm like, how could you guys do that? All my clients use it. And I'm thinking, oh, this, I can't use it anymore. I'm not going to be strong. And I didn't use it for a month, and I laughed. I'm like, I don't even notice the difference. So it wasn't a loss to me because I get all my stuff for free. But to my clients who are paying a good amount of money for this supplement, I'm going, and they're asking me, they're just dying for something else to take. What do I take? I'm not taking anything. I'm like, well, have you noticed anything different? No, not really. Then don't buy anything else. You know, there isn't a lot of stuff out there that's going to make a huge difference, except for the things that they don't, nobody wants you to take because they're drugs. They actually are drugs because they work. So anything over the counter, there's just no sense. In my opinion, there's no sense. Your protein powder, of course, because these days technology, even with some of the crappier protein companies out there, they still have a relatively good quality product, and it's relatively inexpensive. It's not bad. I mean, for what you would pay for a chicken breast, you can have a protein shake. I would say not to get any carbs in your protein, because carbs and protein, anytime you drink a carbohydrate, really, it's crap. I don't care if they call it Swedish oat starch or anything else, it's still a powder carbohydrate. and it's gonna hit your bloodstream like a powdered carbohydrate. So if you're taking it in post-workout, that's good. Because fast carbs, some fast carbs post-workout, that's fine. There's no problem there because your body needs them, it's gonna suck them up. It's an insulin sensitivity issue, and it is what it is. But that's really the only time you're gonna get away with that. Plus, if you're gonna drink maltodextrin post-workout, because just have some kids cereal, because it tastes way better anyway, and it does the same thing. You can put your protein powder over like Cocoa Krispies or something. No, I've got to have my corn waxy starch. That's, that sounds good.
Well, you hit on something there too in terms of, you just talked about chicken breast, for example. Our grandparents used to use far less oil. They would steam, for example. So you would get the benefits out of that piece of chicken without all the oil and the fats. And nowadays, it's well known that at oil manufacturers you have quality and you have quality. And some of the poorer people really are consuming stuff that are killing them and they don't even know because it's recycled oil.
Right.
It's just,
Right.
Well,
and you're coming around too. I think it's funny because I'm of the old school that coconut oil is so
coconut
bad.
oil, exactly.
Yeah, and it's funny to see it come around now,
Yeah.
and you read the research. So now I look at it as a nutritionist, I go, gosh, there's some things out there that are still archaic that we are avoiding that may well have. I think what it shows is we really know this much about nutrition as a whole. So to me, it's the most fascinating part of training or whatever, because everything else is just so simple and so there, so set stuff. You want to get bigger, lift up a big weight, you put it down. I mean, eventually, if you do it enough, you're going to get bigger. But the nutrition and the supplementation, especially, I mean, they're just huge advances. Every few months something else is going to happen or something else is going to come out that I have to check on and go, oh my gosh, wow, okay, cool. And it might not even be related to conditioning, it might even be related to health. And I always say, me getting older, 10 years ago I got shingles so bad that I have nerve pain every 20 to 30 seconds along this branch around to my back, and I've had it for over 10 years. And what that did was it made me focus more on health, because I was losing 60 pounds for a show, and I was thinking I was getting, I was bulking in the off season. I had man boobs, but I was bulking in the off season. And trying to do chins and ripping your bicep because you weigh 270 pounds and you have no business weighing 270 pounds. So I had to take a longer look at my health, and I try now to push as hard as I can, push that on other people, because even if you look at it and go, yeah, but Skip, you're old, I'm not old. You're gonna be one of these days. And if you're only training for a few years, more power to you. But if you're gonna train and you have longevity in mind, shameless plug for an awesome DVD. Yeah, good looking cat too, I guess. Anyway, if you're in it for the long haul, you gotta think about it. Your training, your joints, you gotta train right. You gotta take care of yourself, and you just can't be dumping garbage in, because there's gonna come a day where you're gonna pay the price. You're just going to. And there's a whole lot of other things, belts, no belts, and when you get into training and the longevity part of it. I don't want to keep you guys too long. I'd be happy to answer questions and things like that, but what I did want to do is I wanted to touch on balance, just to kind of close it out. Balance and perspective. As a competitor, it's very easy, and even as trainers, I think you guys probably do. It's just constantly consuming you. Your training, your client's training, people who just start out on a new program. You're probably looking at, man, I lost 50 pounds, and you might even think about competing, and you're thinking, how can I get my abs thicker? And it can anyway, it can consume you, and it can kind of get in the way of other things, especially as a competitor. And I just really want to push not only the health aspect of it, but to keep it all in perspective and to find that balance, because a lot of people think that the more time and the more effort they put into it, the more successful they're going to be. But a one-dimensional person is a pretty boring person to talk to. There's nothing worse than when I sit down and people just want to talk. Here's different. We can talk about nutrition, and I'm happy to talk about it. But if you were sitting at the resort, you came up to me and you wanted to know how much I benched and what I ate and everything else, I would just sit there thinking I'd sooner slit my wrist than talk about, like, can't we talk about guns or drugs or something cool, you know, fun? Just talk about guy stuff. It's that one-dimensional, and people who train and work out, and especially competitors are terrible for it, they'll just get around other competitors. Then they just sit there and they tell everybody how great they are and how awesome they look, and that's all they ever talk about. So it can be hard. And trainers, it's difficult too, because your friends are probably trainers, you're around your trainers all the time, and it can become consuming. And you won't progress any quicker. I think that's the misconception. If I do this, and Phil Heath doesn't sit there and he tries not to anyway. It's hard at that level because his travel and what he does really is like, oh, sit there and play Black Ops for hours for probably no other reason than just to get away from a bodybuilding type of environment, I guess. And he likes to talk about other stuff too. That's why people like that are cool in the sense that they can balance themselves out and they can talk about other things. Not going to get any better focusing on lifting the weights and dieting and that sort of thing. Having a bad meal, again, it's consistency, not perfection. You go out, you go on vacation, I have no worries about it at all. My ankles start to swell up, I figure, you know what, I'm out for a week. I haven't taken a week of not eating all year, eating whatever I want. And then I'll go back and I'll clean up the mess when I get back and drop 10 pounds. I feel a whole lot better. When I smile, my eyes won't close, things like that.